The sound cuts through the silence like a whisper from another world, an ancient Inca flute, its haunting melody woven with secrets older than time itself. Close your eyes for a moment, and you can almost feel the damp chill of a hidden temple, the flicker of torchlight against stone walls carved with symbols no modern scholar fully understands. This isn't just music, it's a key, a bridge to realms beyond our own. The Inca believed sound could bend reality, that certain rituals could tear open the veil between worlds. And what they sought on the other side, knowledge, power, communion with beings who existed outside the boundaries of time and space. But these weren't ceremonies performed in the light of day. They were forbidden, reserved for the bravest or the most desperate souls. Imagine standing in that darkened chamber, the air thick with the scent of burnt herbs, the weight of centuries pressing down on you. The priests chanted words lost to history, their voices rising and falling in rhythms that seemed to sync with the very pulse of the earth. According to Inca cosmology, our world is just one thread in a vast tapestry of parallel realities, some mirroring our own, others so alien they defy comprehension. The rituals they performed weren't mere superstition. They were precise, dangerous attempts to step through the fabric of existence itself. Some legends speak of shamans who never returned, their bodies left behind like empty shells while their spirits wandered dimensions we can't even name. Others tell of fleeting glimpses into these other worlds, visions of cities built from light, of beings who spoke without words, of futures that hadn't yet come to pass. Why would anyone risk invoking such powers? The answers lie buried in the remnants of a civilization that understood the universe in ways we're only beginning to grasp. The Inca weren't just exploring parallel realities, they were searching for something. A truth, a weapon, a salvation. We may never know for certain, but what we do know is this: the methods they used were so potent, so volatile, that they were guarded with deadly secrecy. To speak of them openly was to invite disaster. Today, we're left with fragments, whispers in archaeological ruins, half-remembered oral traditions, and the unsettling feeling that some doors once opened were never meant to be closed. So let's journey together into the heart of these forbidden rituals, peeling back the layers of myth and history to uncover what the Inca might have known and what they feared. Because some mysteries aren't just stories, they're warnings. To the Inca, our world was just the surface of something far deeper, a cosmos rippling with unseen layers, each humming with its own energy. They called these realms Kay Pacha, Ukhu Pacha, and Hanan Pacha, the world we walk upon, the shadowy depths below, and the luminous heavens above. But these weren't just distant places, they were alive, intertwined like roots and branches of a cosmic tree. Kay Pacha was the middle ground, the realm of humans where crops grew and rivers flowed, but it was also a fragile balance, easily disrupted. Below lay Ukhu Pacha, a labyrinth of caves and springs, home to spirits of the dead and forces of chaos. And above, Hanan Pacha blazed with celestial order, where gods spoke through constellations and storms. What's fascinating isn't just their map of the universe, it's how they moved between these layers. Shamans didn't just pray or meditate, they performed elaborate rituals to step across thresholds. Picture this: a shaman chewing sacred coca leaves, their pulse syncing with the drumbeat as they called to the spirits. They'd descend into trances so deep, witnesses claimed their eyes turned black as obsidian, a sign they'd crossed into Ukhu Pacha. Others climbed mountains at dawn, fasting until their bodies were light enough, they said, to brush against Hanan Pacha. These journeys weren't metaphorical. The Inca believed their shamans could physically traverse these realms, returning with prophecies, cures, or warnings. And here's where it gets even more intriguing. They didn't see these worlds as separate but as reflections. A river in Kay Pacha might mirror a constellation in Hanan Pacha, or a cave in Ukhu Pacha could echo the womb of a goddess. This symmetry wasn't coincidence, it was communication. A shaman might read an eclipse as a message from the underworld, or interpret an earthquake as the gods rearranging the layers. Nature wasn't just alive to them, it was a language. When a condor circled overhead, it wasn't just hunting, it was a bridge between earth and sky, carrying whispers between realms. This worldview wasn't abstract philosophy. It shaped every aspect of Inca life, their architecture, their agriculture, even their wars. Temples were built at mountain summits to touch Hanan Pacha. Irrigation channels followed sacred pathways believed to mirror underground rivers in Ukhu Pacha, and when invaders came, legends say they called on warriors from all three realms, summoning ancestors and storm gods alike. But this fluency with the multiverse came at a cost. Only the most trained, most disciplined minds could navigate these crossings safely. One misstep, a flawed ritual, an unanswered demand from the spirits, and the consequences were said to be catastrophic. Some whispered of entire villages vanishing overnight, swallowed by the realms they'd tried to command. So why does this matter today? Because beneath the gold and grandeur of the Inca Empire lies a truth we're still uncovering. They didn't just live in their world. They spoke to it, and in those conversations they found answers, some of which we're only beginning to translate. The blood moon ceremony wasn't just performed, it was survived. Under the eerie glow of a lunar eclipse, when the moon turned the color of a fresh wound, Inca priests gathered in absolute secrecy. This wasn't mere astronomy to them, it was a cosmic doorway swinging open. They believed eclipses weakened the boundaries between worlds, thinning the veil just enough for those who knew the rituals to slip through. Preparation began days in advance. The chosen priests underwent rigorous fasting, purifying their bodies with steam baths scented with sacred herbs like munya and huamanripa. Their minds had to be empty of all but one purpose: crossing over. The night itself unfolded with terrifying precision. As the moon darkened, they drank a brew so potent, surviving texts describe it simply as the tears of the gods. Made from vilca seeds mixed with chicha fermented under 3 nights of moonlight, this concoction didn't just induce visions, it catapulted the drinker into realms beyond the physical. But the brew alone wasn't enough. The ritual demanded blood. A jet-black llama, carefully selected for its unblemished coat, was led to the altar. Its sacrifice wasn't just symbolic. The Inca believed the animal's spirit became a guide, its life force fueling the priest's journey. The moment the knife fell, the air was said to thicken, humming with an almost electric charge. Then came the chanting, low, guttural syllables passed down through generations, never written, only whispered. Witnesses spoke of the priest's eyes rolling back, their bodies convulsing as if gripped by invisible hands. Those who returned, and not all did, reported the same haunting details, a sensation of being pulled through a tunnel of wind and light, emerging in landscapes that defied logic. One account describes a city of towering crystal, its streets flowing with liquid silver. Another tells of shadow figures with elongated limbs, their mouths moving soundlessly, as if shouting warnings no human ear could hear. But the most chilling testimonies came from priests who claimed to meet their own doubles versions of themselves from other timelines, some wiser, some broken, all screamingly aware of the trespass. The Inca called these encounters the mirror of souls, and they were both the ritual's greatest prize and its gravest danger. To interact with these echoes was forbidden. Even a whisper could unravel the fabric of the traveler's own reality. Yet some couldn't resist. A fragment of a surviving prayer alludes to a priest who asked his double for knowledge of the future, and returned with his hair turned white, babbling about a great darkness that would unstitch the sky. Why risk such horrors? Because the blood moon ceremony wasn't about curiosity. It was a desperate gambit for survival. The Inca lived in a world of earthquakes, conquest, and drought. These rituals were their attempt to seek answers from the universe itself, to beg for mercy, to steal fire from the gods, or to at least glimpse the coming storms. But the cost was high. Every ceremony ended with a binding oath, a vow never to speak of what was seen. Those who broke it were said to vanish within 3 days, their bodies found with no marks, their faces frozen in expressions of unbearable recognition. The Inca understood something modern science is only now confronting. Some doors once opened change the one who walks through, and some truths are too heavy for a single world to hold. The whispers haven't stopped. Centuries after the fall of the Inca Empire, echoes of the Blood Moon ceremony still ripple through the Andes, drawing curious anthropologists and desperate seekers to its forbidden gates. In the late 1990s, a team of researchers working near Cusco documented something extraordinary: a group of Quechua elders who claimed to preserve fragments of the ritual. When pressed, one elder reluctantly demonstrated a simplified version under a partial eclipse. What happened next chilled even the skeptics. The man, previously fluent in Spanish, began speaking in a guttural tongue no linguist could identify. His eyes darkened until the pupils vanished entirely, and for 12 minutes he described in perfect detail a cavern system beneath the site that hadn't been discovered yet. When archaeologists checked, they found the tunnels exactly where he'd said, lined with carvings of the same shadow figures from ancient accounts. But the most unsettling reports come from those who ignored the elders' warnings. In 2012, an American anthropologist named Daniel Reeves attempted a full recreation using historical texts. His journal, recovered after his disappearance, describes the Vilca brew burning his throat like liquid lightning, followed by visions of a city where the stars pulsed in sync with his heartbeat. He wrote of meeting a figure who wore his face but spoke in reversed sentences, warning him to close the door before the tides came. Reeves was found 3 days later, miles from his campsite, clutching a rock carved with symbols matching those from Inca eclipse rituals. He couldn't remember anything, but his hair had turned snow white overnight. Locals speak of others who weren't so lucky. In the village of Ollantaytambo, there's a story of 2 brothers who tried the ritual in 2018. One returned with his left hand aged decades, the skin wrinkled and spotted while the rest of him remained young. The other, he's still spoken of in hushed tones. Witnesses say he stepped into a moonlit shadow during the ceremony and never stepped back out. To this day, shepherds claim to see his silhouette flickering near the site during eclipses, one arm outstretched as if frozen mid-fall between worlds. Elders insist these aren't ghost stories, they're cautionary tales. The ritual doesn't just open a door, it removes the threshold entirely, and some who cross forget which side they came from. Modern neurologists studying these accounts point to eerie parallels with near-death experiences and dissociative states, but the Quechua know better. The worlds are sticky, one shaman told researchers. What brushes against you there doesn't always wipe clean. Perhaps that's why the Inca guarded this knowledge so fiercely. Not because it didn't work, but because it worked too well. The Gate of Amaru Muru isn't just a rock formation, it's a wound in reality. Carved into the side of a desolate mountain near Lake Titicaca, this smooth, rectangular portal stands 7 meters tall, its surface unnaturally flat, as if molten stone were sliced open and left to cool. Local legends say it was never made by human hands. The Aymara people whisper that it appeared overnight, a gift or a test from the god Amaru Muru, who descended from the stars wearing a belt of living light. To the Inca, this wasn't just a myth. It was a working apparatus. They believed the gate could open, but only under precise conditions. When the right offering was placed in its central depression, often a golden disc or a vial of sacred water, and when a priest chanted the Song of the Serpent, a melody said to vibrate at the exact frequency of the veil between worlds. Eyewitness accounts from Spanish chroniclers tell of eerie occurrences near the gate. One soldier's journal from the 1500s describes seeing an Inca priest place his palm against the stone while humming, only for the surface to ripple like pond water struck by rain. The priest stepped through and didn't return for 3 days. When he reappeared, his skin was covered in faint blue markings, and he carried a lump of metal that burned cold and dissolved into powder by morning. Modern archaeologists dismiss these tales as folklore, but even the most skeptical admit the gate's design is anomalous. The precision of its edges suggests tools far beyond Inca technology, and the surrounding rock shows no chisel marks, only smooth fusion, as if the stone itself flowed to form the doorway. Then there are the disappearances. In 1996, a German tourist named Klaus Donner filmed himself meditating near the gate. His camera captured a faint violet glow emanating from the stone before the footage cut to static. Search teams found his backpack leaning against the portal, its contents untouched, even the water in his canteen still cold. More chilling are the reports from nearby villagers who claim to hear disembodied chanting during full moons, voices humming a tune that matches descriptions of the ancient serpent song. Some shepherds swear they've seen figures in Inca garb standing motionless before the gate at dawn, only to vanish when approached. Scientists have theories, of course. Geologists suggest the site might sit atop a natural quartz deposit, amplifying sound vibrations in ways that could induce collective hallucinations. But that doesn't explain the physical traces, the metallic debris found near the gate that, when analyzed, contains isotopes unknown on Earth, or the way compasses spin wildly within 10 meters of the structure, as if the very magnetic field twists around it. The most haunting possibility that the Inca knew exactly what they were doing, that the Gate of Amaru Muru isn't just a ceremonial site but a functional device, one that still works. Because every few years someone tries to activate it, and sometimes they don't come back. The air around the Gate of Amaru Muru crackles with more than just legend, it hums with measurable energy. During the solstices, when the sun aligns perfectly with the stone portal, instruments pick up electromagnetic spikes that defy conventional explanation. In 2018, a team from the University of Buenos Aires recorded fluctuations strong enough to short-circuit their equipment, with readings peaking at precisely the moment the sun's rays struck the gate's central depression. One researcher described it as standing inside a tuning fork, the vibrations so intense they rattled teeth. What's even stranger, these anomalies follow a pattern. Every June and December, the same bursts occur, each lasting exactly 17 minutes before vanishing as abruptly as they began. Skeptics argue these could be natural geological phenomena, piezoelectric charges from quartz deposits, or underground water shifting beneath tectonic stress. But that doesn't account for the thermal irregularities. Infrared scans reveal cold spots near the gate's edges during these events, areas where temperatures drop suddenly by 12 to 15 degrees, while the surrounding rock remains unaffected. It's as if something or somewhere is drawing the heat away. Geophysicist Dr. Elena Quisp, who studied the site for a decade, notes another peculiar detail. Compass needles don't just spin erratically near the gate during solstices. They point consistently southeast, aligning with an ancient Inca pilgrimage route said to trace ley lines of the gods. Then there's the sound. In 2021, a documentary crew left audio recorders overnight during the winter solstice. The playback revealed something unsettling, a low-frequency pulse barely within human hearing range, repeating every 33 seconds. When analyzed, the waveform matched no known natural vibration. Yet elders from the nearby village of Juli recognized it instantly. They called it the breath of Amaru, a tone their ancestors claimed could soften stone. Modern acoustics experts admit the frequency falls within ranges shown to affect molecular structures, something the Inca couldn't possibly have quantified, yet clearly exploited. Not everyone's convinced, of course. Dr. Richard Mercer of Oxford's Parapsychology Lab argues these phenomena could be collective psychological triggers, the gate's mystique priming visitors to interpret mundane events as extraordinary. You see similar effects at haunted sites worldwide, he says. Expectation alters perception, but even Mercer concedes the solstice data is harder to dismiss. The numbers don't lie. Something tangible happens here, whether it's dimensional thinning or an undiscovered geological process. Perhaps the most telling detail comes from a physicist who visited incognito in 2019, leaving behind a single handwritten note. If this were man-made, we'd call it technology. Staring at the gate now, worn smooth by centuries of wind and wonder, it's hard not to feel the weight of that ambiguity. Science demands proof, but the air here thrums with whispers of something beyond measurement. Maybe the truth lies somewhere between, not in dismissing the anomalies outright, nor in romanticizing them, but in admitting that some stones keep their secrets stubbornly. After all, if the gate truly is a relic of something older and stranger than the Inca, perhaps it's waiting for us to ask the right questions in the right way, just as the priests once did, under solstice skies heavy with stars and possibility. The golden disc invocation wasn't just a ritual, it was a celestial conversation. Imagine holding a disc the size of a dinner plate, its surface hammered from pure gold so thin, light could pass through it like mist. Etched into that gleaming metal were spirals and lines so precise, they mapped the movements of stars unseen by the naked eye. To the untrained, these were mere decorations. But to the Inca priests, they were instructions, coordinates for calling out across the folds of reality. The ceremony began at midnight when the constellation they called the Serpent's Eye hung directly overhead. The lead priest would raise the disc with both hands, aligning its central hole with that cluster of stars. Then, with a flick of the wrist, they'd set the disc spinning. At first, it moved slowly, catching moonlight in ripples. But as the chant grew louder, a low, resonant tone said to mimic the voice of the void, the disc would accelerate, its edges blurring until it seemed to vanish, leaving only a humming ring of light. Colonial scribes who witnessed this wrote of a sound that pierced the bones, a vibration that made teeth ache and torches gutter as if snuffed by invisible fingers. What happened next defied logic. The spinning disc didn't just reflect light. It began to emit it, casting shifting patterns on the temple walls that matched no known constellation. Survivors of Francisco Pizarro's expeditions claimed these projections showed cities of glass and beasts with too many limbs, images that drove at least 2 Spanish soldiers to madness. But the true purpose of the ritual wasn't to glimpse other worlds, it was to invite something back. The discs weren't passive instruments. Each one bore a unique inscription around its rim, a series of notches sized to alter the sound they produced when spinning. Modern acousticians who have studied replicas note these grooves create infrasound frequencies, tones too deep for human ears to register, yet capable of inducing trance states and even physical discomfort. The Inca didn't just know this, they weaponized it. At the ritual's peak, when the disc reached a speed where its hum became a scream, priests would suddenly reverse its spin. Eyewitness accounts describe the air itself seeming to tear at that moment, with several chronicles mentioning a sulfur stench and a pressure so intense it burst eardrums. Then, if the ritual succeeded, the disc would stop dead despite no hand touching it, and hover midair for precisely 7 heartbeats. During that pause, the participants reported a sensation of being watched from all directions at once. Some vomited, others laughed hysterically. A Jesuit missionary's diary from 1594 recounts a priest whispering, "They're here," before blood began streaming from his nostrils. No one ever documented what they looked like. The Inca forbade it, insisting that to describe the entities was to invite them permanently into our world. But the aftermath spoke volumes. Discs used in successful invocations were found tarnished the next morning, their gold blackened as if burned from within. And priests who conducted the ritual more than once were said to age unnaturally fast, their hair whitening and skin wrinkling as if decades passed in weeks. Why take such risks? Fragments of a hymn recovered from a looted temple suggest the discs weren't just tools, they were treaties. The Inca believed these interdimensional beings had once walked among them, teaching secrets of architecture and astronomy before withdrawing beyond the veil. The rituals were a way to call them back, to beg for knowledge or protection in desperate times. but the cost of these bargains grew heavier with each invocation. By the time the Spanish arrived, the practice was already rare, whispered about only by the highest-ranking shamans. Perhaps they'd learned the hardest lesson of all: some doors don't just open outward. They let things in. Could those golden discs have been more than ceremonial objects? Could they have been sophisticated machines? Modern researchers studying ancient acoustic technologies are uncovering eerie parallels between Inca rituals and cutting-edge science. Take cymatics, the study of visible sound vibrations. When scientists play specific frequencies through a plate covered in sand, intricate geometric patterns emerge, shapes that bear a striking resemblance to the etchings on those Inca discs. Some experiments even show that at certain pitches, the vibrations can temporarily warp space-time metrics, creating microscopic anomalies in gravitational fields. It's as if the Inca were manipulating principles we've only recently begun to quantify. Then there's the matter of the tunnels. In 2019, archaeologists mapping a sealed chamber beneath Sacsayhuaman discovered a trove of artifacts, including 7 intact discs stored in niches lined with quartz. What makes these discs different? Their grooves aren't just decorative, they're mathematically precise. When scanned with laser interferometry, each groove corresponds to a harmonic frequency capable of cancelling out ambient sound waves. One researcher compared them to ancient noise-cancelling headphones, suggesting priests might have used them to isolate ritual tones from interfering vibrations. But the real shock came when replicas were spun in controlled tests. At exactly 5,300 revolutions per minute, a speed achievable with practiced wrist flicks, the discs emitted a subsonic pulse that caused water droplets in the air to hover momentarily. That shouldn't be possible without electromagnetic intervention. The most provocative theory comes from Dr. Lina Torres, a physicist who studies resonant portals. She notes that when certain frequencies interact with high-purity metals like the disc's gold, they can generate localized distortions in what's known as the Casimir field, the quantum foam underlying space itself. It's like plucking a guitar string made of space-time, she explains. The Inca may have stumbled upon a way to tune reality temporarily. Her team's models show that under ideal conditions, spinning discs with the right harmonics could theoretically open micrometer-scale wormholes briefly. That aligns with indigenous accounts of priests seeing threads of light stretching from the discs during ceremonies, but here's where it gets chilling. Last year, engineers inspecting the newly found discs noticed something the Inca couldn't have known: microscopic wear patterns indicating repeated exposure to intense heat, not from fire but from rapid molecular friction. The only modern process that leaves similar marks: particle accelerator collisions. Whatever those priests were summoning, it wasn't just sound or light. It was energy on a scale that shouldn't exist in artifacts from the 15th century. Perhaps the most haunting clue lies in what wasn't found. Of the 7 discs recovered, 1 was shattered, its fragments arranged in a perfect circle as if something had exploded outward from within. Lab analysis revealed trace elements of an alloy unknown in nature, a blend of gold, iridium, and an unidentified metallic isotope with a half-life shorter than a heartbeat. The only place such isotopes form naturally, the heart of collapsing stars. That disk didn't break, something tore its way out. The Datura Trance wasn't entered lightly. It was a last resort, a one-way ticket to realms where the rules of flesh no longer applied. Shamans called it the Night Flower Path, named for the bell-shaped blooms of the Brugmansia plant, their petals pale as moonlight and laced with toxins so potent 3 seeds could halt a human heart. Yet these priests swallowed them willingly, chewing the bitter pods with ritual precision before collapsing into comas that lasted days. Those who survived the ordeal returned forever changed, their eyes permanently dilated as if still absorbing light from some distant dimension. What awaited them in that poisoned sleep? Survivors spoke of a transition as visceral as drowning lungs seizing, the world shrinking to a pinprick of light, then suddenly. Expansion. They described standing on a plain of black sand beneath a sky streaked with colors no earthly language could name. The air smelled of ozone and crushed herbs, and the ground vibrated with a low, constant hum. Most chilling of all, multiple shamans separated by centuries and geography recounted identical landmarks: a jagged obsidian tower, a river flowing backward, and most unnerving, clusters of figures they called the Mirrored Ones. These beings weren't reflections in the traditional sense. They moved independently, yet their features precisely matched people from the shaman's waking life: family members, rivals, even childhood friends long dead. One 17th-century account tells of a priest encountering his own double, who reached out with hands that passed through his chest like smoke through smoke. The double then whispered 7 words that later proved to be the exact phrase the priest's sister would scream during her fatal illness 3 years later. Such accounts weren't rare. Nearly 1 in 3 survivors reported premonitions gathered from these mirror entities, though the information often came at a gruesome price. The physical toll was even more harrowing. Datura doesn't just induce hallucinations, it dissolves the boundary between reality and delirium so completely that users have been known to walk off cliffs or claw at their own skin, convinced they're covered in spiders. Shamans prepared for this with elaborate safeguards. Before ingestion, they'd be bound hand and foot with ropes woven from vicuña hair, a fiber strong enough to restrain, yet soft enough not to break the skin during convulsions. Assistants kept vigil, chanting continuously to anchor the traveler's spirit, while obsidian daggers were placed at the 4 cardinal directions to ward off hostile entities. Even then, some never fully returned. Spanish chronicler Cristobal de Molina documented one such case in 1572, where a shaman awoke speaking a language no interpreter recognized. Over the next fortnight, his body deteriorated rapidly, his teeth loosened, his nails grew at visible speed, and his irises lightened from brown to gray. On the 15th morning, he reportedly looked at his horrified attendants and said, "I told you not to wake me," before collapsing into a pile of desiccated flesh and brittle bones. Modern toxicologists speculate this could have been advanced atropine poisoning, but traditional healers maintain a darker explanation. His soul had stayed too long in the other world, leaving his body hollow. Perhaps the most unsettling detail comes from contemporary neuroscience. Datura's active compounds, scopolamine and atropine, don't just cause hallucinations, they suppress the brain's ability to form new memories during intoxication. This means shamans shouldn't have been able to recall their journeys at all, yet they did with uncanny clarity, describing landscapes and conversations in minute detail. Some researchers suggest the plant might open temporary pathways in dormant neural regions, accessing what psychiatrist Stanislav Grof called transpersonal consciousness. Indigenous elders put it differently. The flower doesn't show you dreams, it takes you somewhere real. Those brave or desperate enough to undergo the ritual today report the same phenomena. In 2016, an anthropologist working with Quechua healers in Peru documented a shaman's journey under controlled conditions. Though paralyzed by the toxins, his rapid eye movements suggested vivid dreaming. Upon waking, he drew a detailed map of a subterranean city, a place he called the Library of Lost Voices. 6 months later, seismic imaging revealed a vast, unexplored cavern system beneath the region, its dimensions matching his sketch eerily well. When asked how he'd seen it, the shaman simply touched his still dilated pupils and said, "The eyes you use there aren't the ones you're born with." What lingers in these accounts isn't just the terror of the unknown, but the eerie consistency of the visions across time and culture. Whether chemical hallucination or interdimensional voyage, the Datura Trance forces us to confront a haunting possibility, that every mind carries the coordinates to places beyond our understanding. And some plants, like some doorways, only open from the inside. Science struggles to explain how Datura's poison becomes a portal. The plant's key compounds, scopolamine and atropine, act like molecular lockpicks, jamming the brain's acetylcholine receptors. This isn't just intoxication, it's a full-scale neurological coup. Muscles freeze, pupils dilate until eyes become black pools, and the prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational thought, goes eerily quiet. Modern brain scans during Datura trances show something astonishing. The visual cortex lights up as if processing real images, while the thalamus, the brain's sensory gatekeeper, stops filtering input entirely. The result, a flood of unfiltered neural noise that the mind desperately stitches into coherent scenes. Neuroscientists call this constrained chaos, a state where the brain, deprived of normal sensory input, hallucinates entire worlds to fill the void. Yet indigenous shamans reject this explanation with quiet certainty. The white coats see only the ladder, not the sky it reaches, one Quechua elder remarked. For them, Datura doesn't distort reality, it removes blinders. They point to the eerie consistency of visions across unrelated users, the black sand plains, the obsidian tower, the mirrored entities. Probability says strangers shouldn't hallucinate the same details, yet anthropological records spanning 5 centuries document these same motifs, even more perplexing. Shared hallucinations. In 1987, 2 initiates in Bolivia drank Datura tea simultaneously while bound back to back. Afterward, both independently described meeting a figure covered in living vines who gave them identical warnings about an upcoming drought, a drought that began 3 weeks later. Coincidence? The shaman smile. When you open the same door, you see the same room. Modern researchers are starting to entertain radical possibilities. Dr. Evelyn Chen's work at Stanford suggests Datura might temporarily rewire neural pathways, granting access to what she terms the collective sensory band, a hypothetical layer of perception where our brains normally filter out ambient biological data, like the Earth's magnetic fields or quantum fluctuations. It's like tuning a radio to a frequency we've always been broadcasting but never consciously received, she explains. This could explain why so many users report downloads of impossible knowledge, a shaman accurately diagnosing illnesses he'd never encountered or predicting events continents away. The plant itself adds another wrinkle. Datura doesn't grow wild in the Andes. It was cultivated exclusively for ritual use, bred over generations for specific alkaloid ratios. Chemical analysis shows Inca Datura strains had unusually high levels of scopolamine relative to atropine, a balance modern pharmacologists recognize as producing fewer deadly side effects while enhancing vivid, structured visions. This wasn't accidental. The priests weren't just consuming a plant, they were engineering a biotechnology. Perhaps the truth lies beyond both explanations. Near-death experiences often describe similar realms to Datura travelers, the same sensation of being watched by mirror selves, the same architectural impossibilities. Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung believed these visions tapped into the collective unconscious, a shared reservoir of archetypes, but the Inca went further. They claimed the Datura trance revealed Kay Pacha's hidden architecture, the seams where reality folds. When a shaman saw his double whisper a future truth, perhaps he wasn't hallucinating. Perhaps he'd glimpsed the universe's blueprint, where time isn't linear and every possibility already exists. The most chilling evidence comes from contemporary experiments. In 2021, researchers at the University of Lima administered microdoses of Datura to volunteers in isolation tanks, eliminating external sensory input. Over 70% reported encounters with the mirrored ones, despite no prior knowledge of the phenomenon. Even stranger, EEG readings showed identical brainwave synchronization during these encounters, as if multiple minds were briefly tuning to the same frequency. One participant, a neurologist who'd been skeptical, later wrote, "It wasn't like seeing something that wasn't there. It was like suddenly remembering a place I'd always known but couldn't name." Science may never fully reconcile these perspectives, but walking the ruins of an Inca temple at dusk, listening to descendants still sing the old chants, one thing becomes clear: Datura was never just a drug. It was a covenant, a way to step outside the human sensorium and touch whatever lies, patient and vast, just beyond the veil of ordinary sight. And whether that veil parts through neurochemistry or some deeper magic, the result is the same. Some who lift it can't unsee what waits behind. The dead did not stay silent in the Inca Empire. They whispered secrets only the boldest dared to hear. Among the most forbidden rituals was the consultation of the Malquis, mummified ancestors preserved with such care their skin remained supple, their postures lifelike as if merely sleeping. But these weren't relics to be revered from a distance. They were active participants in ceremonies so dangerous, even high priests approached them with trembling hands. The Inca believed death didn't sever a soul's connection to this world. It shifted that soul's perception, allowing it to see the threads between realities. And with the right rituals, those threads could be pulled. Preparing a Malqui for interdimensional guidance was a gruesome art. The body underwent a process called khipu, where organs were replaced with sacred herbs and minerals, quartz powder in the eye sockets to retain visions, gold foil under the tongue to speak truth. Most chilling was the final step, a slit cut along the corpse's throat into which priests inserted a slender reed. Through this, they claimed, the ancestor's voice could still be heard, not as memory but as a living whisper. Spanish chronicler Juan de Betanzos described the sound as like wind through a canyon, yet forming words clear as spring water. These weren't vague omens. Multiple accounts tell of mummies accurately predicting Spanish troop movements days in advance, or describing distant events in real time. But the true purpose of these consultations wasn't divination, it was travel. In a ritual performed only during the lunar eclipse known as the moon's death, priests would arrange 7 Malquis in a circle, their preserved fingers interlocked like a chain. At the center stood the living traveler, who drank a blend of chicha beer mixed with powdered Malqui bone, a concoction said to thin the veil between worlds. As the eclipse reached totality, the priests would blow through the reeds in each mummy's throat, creating a discordant chorus of whispers that survivors described as the language before language. Those who underwent the ritual reported a sensation of being pulled downward, as if the floor had turned to smoke, while the mummy's empty eyes seemed to track their descent. The aftermath was often grotesque. Several mummies used in these rites were later found in positions no corpse could naturally assume, kneeling with spines arched backward or with arms extended upward as if frozen mid-gesture. In 2014, archaeologists excavating a sealed chamber near Machu Picchu uncovered 3 Malquis arranged in a perfect triangle, their jaws unhinged far beyond human capacity. Stranger still were the traces of a metallic blue residue coating their teeth, later identified as a compound containing cobalt and an unknown organic binder. Contemporary shamans recognize it instantly, the star paint, a substance said to let the dead chew through dimensions. Why risk such horrors? Because the Malquis weren't just guides, they were maps. The Inca believed these ancestors had already navigated the afterlife, their preserved bodies acting as anchors tying them to specific realms. A mummy with hands folded over its chest might lead to the celestial Hanan Pacha, while one curled in the fetal position could descend into Ukhu Pacha's labyrinth. But the most sought after were the dancing Malquis, corpses found mid-motion, their limbs forever caught in some incomprehensible step. These were said to have glimpsed realities beyond the 3 worlds' realities, where time flowed sideways or causality unraveled like yarn. Not all who sought their counsel returned intact. A fragmentary text from the colonial era tells of a priest named Mata Capac, who emerged from a Malqui ritual with his shadow moving independently, lagging 3 seconds behind his body. Within a month, witnesses claimed he began aging in reverse, his wrinkles smoothing, his hair darkening, until he vanished during a new moon. The last Malqui he'd consulted was found facing the wall, its reed clogged with a substance scribes described as black salt. To this day, Quechua elders warn that some whispers aren't meant to be answered, because the dead don't just know the way between worlds, they know the price of the journey. And sometimes that price isn't yours to pay. Echoes still slither through the stone corridors of Inca tombs, murmurs caught between worlds long after the last priest vanished. Modern paranormal researchers venturing into these burial chambers armed with digital recorders and infrared cameras aren't just chasing ghosts, they're stumbling onto phenomena that mirror ancient accounts with eerie precision. Take the case of Huayna Piku's Whispering Tomb, where a team from the Paranormal Research Collective left 6 voice recorders overnight in 2019. The playback revealed something that defies easy explanation. 17 distinct whispers layered over one another, some speaking in a guttural dialect linguists identified as a dead form of Quechua, while others vocalized in frequencies below the range of human vocal cords. Most unsettling, when played backward, the garbled syllables rearranged into a perfect recitation of an Inca death chant, one only documented in a single surviving manuscript locked in a Madrid archive. Thermal imaging adds another layer to the mystery. During a 2022 investigation at a sealed burial niche near Ollantaytambo, cameras captured sudden cold spots forming in perfect geometric patterns, hexagonal zones where temperatures plummeted nearly 30 degrees in seconds, their edges unnaturally sharp, like someone drew on reality with ice, as one researcher put it. These anomalies didn't drift or fade like typical cold drafts. They snapped into existence, lingered for exactly 3 minutes each time, then vanished instantaneously. Stranger still, when superimposed over the site's blueprints, the cold zones aligned precisely with the cardinal points where priests once placed obsidian mirrors during Malqui rituals. Skeptics argue these could be quirks of subterranean airflow, but the timing is harder to dismiss. The drops consistently occurred at 7-minute intervals, a rhythm matching the pulse described in colonial accounts of ancestor ceremonies. The most compelling evidence might come from the tombs themselves. In 2023, archaeologists using ground-penetrating radar beneath the Temple of the Moon discovered a previously unknown chamber, its walls lined with sheets of an unidentified metallic alloy. When a drone was sent through a narrow ventilation shaft, its footage showed what appeared to be 7 mummified figures seated in a circle, their hands linked by thin gold wires. But the real shock came from the audio feed. Though the drone's microphone should have picked up only mechanical hums, the recording contained a low, rhythmic thumping 17 beats per minute, matching the resting heart rate of a healthy adult. The chamber had been sealed for at least 5 centuries. What makes these modern encounters so chilling isn't just their impossibility, it's their specificity. EVPs captured at multiple sites often contain the same phrase, Tiximuyu, an ancient term meaning the intersecting worlds. Thermal anomalies consistently manifest near carvings of the serpent god Amaru, known as the guardian of thresholds. Even the timing aligns. Spikes in paranormal activity cluster around solstices and eclipses, just as the Inca predicted. Perhaps we're not just recording residual energy, but active signals, messages from those who mastered these rituals centuries ago, still pulsing through the stone like a heartbeat waiting to be heard. One thing's certain, the tombs haven't finished speaking. Whether these phenomena are echoes of the past or evidence of something still reaching across dimensions, they force us to confront a haunting possibility. The Inca didn't just believe in parallel realities, they built bridges to them, and some of those bridges might still be open. The celestial cord ceremony wasn't about tying knots, it was about unraveling the fabric of the cosmos itself. Picture this, under a sky so dense with stars it feels like you could reach up and stir them. Inca priests would gather on sacred mountain peaks, their hands moving with hypnotic precision as they wove strands of alpaca wool and hummingbird tendons into intricate khipus. These weren't ordinary ropes, they were living maps, each knot and color a coded message to realms beyond our own. The most sacred of these cords, known as the speaking threads, bore symbols matching constellations like the Pleiades, which the Inca called Kulka, or the gathering place. They believed these star clusters weren't just celestial bodies, they were portals, vibrating at frequencies that could harmonize with their rituals. When the moon aligned with Kulka, the priests would begin the ceremony by soaking the cords in a hallucinogenic brew made from ayahuasca and vilca, their fingers staining blue as they chanted prayers into the fibers. Then, at the precise moment the constellation reached its zenith, they'd whirl the khipu overhead like a sling and release it into the wind, not randomly, but aimed at specific mountain passes where the air was known to twist into unnatural vortices. Colonial accounts describe these sites as where the wind forgets its way, places where thrown objects sometimes vanished midair or reappeared shredded, as if clawed by invisible forces. The Inca claimed the cords didn't disappear, they anchored, tethering our world to others like a climber's rope flung across a chasm, but the real magic lay in the symbols. Modern researchers studying surviving khipus have noticed something unsettling. The knot patterns don't just correspond to constellations, they mirror mathematical models of cosmic strings, theoretical filaments of energy some physicists believe could link parallel universes. Even more bizarre, when a team from Cambridge fed these patterns into a quantum computer simulation in 2021, the output showed brief but measurable fluctuations in localized spacetime metrics, as if the knots were algorithms designed to manipulate reality's code. Indigenous elders weren't surprised. The ancestors didn't write with ink. One Quechua weaver explained, they wrote with the sky, witnesses to the ritual reported eerie aftermaths. Some cords would snap taut in midair, vibrating as if hooked to something unseen before going slack hours later, their fibers scorched with a metallic scent. Others returned altered knots untied or rearranged, the wool woven into patterns no human hand could replicate. A Jesuit missionary's diary from 1602 recounts finding a khipu months after a ceremony, its strands now threaded with silver hairs, finer than spider silk and cold to the touch. Most chilling were the accounts of priests who claimed to hear whispers emanating from the cords at night, not in Quechua, but in a language that made water ripple in nearby bowls. Why go to such lengths? Because the Inca saw the universe as a tapestry fraying at the edges. Every eclipse, every comet, every unnatural storm was a sign of realities brushing against each other, a cosmic imbalance needing correction. The celestial cord ceremony wasn't just exploration, it was maintenance. By tying these symbolic lifelines to Kulka, they believed they could stabilize the weave of existence itself, preventing the layers from unraveling into chaos. Today, fragments of the practice endure. In remote Andean villages, elders still tie simple khipus during meteor showers, whispering prayers to tighten the world's knots. And sometimes, high on glacial peaks where the wind howls like a chorus of lost voices, hikers report finding strands of brightly colored wool, fresh, dry, and knotted in patterns that match no known tradition, snagged on rocks where no human has climbed for centuries. The cords, it seems, are still speaking. The question is whether anyone's left who truly understands what they're saying. The khipu cords may seem like simple strings tied by ancient hands, but their knots hide a language so complex, modern cryptographers are only beginning to decipher its secrets. What first appeared as basic accounting tools recording harvests or tributes now reveal mathematical patterns that mirror principles we've only named in the last century. Take quantum entanglement, the phenomenon where particles separated by vast distances instantly influence each other. The khipu's structure follows eerily similar logic. Researchers at Harvard noticed that certain knots, when untangled mathematically, form equations describing non-local connections, as if the threads themselves were modeling how information could leap across space. One breakthrough came in 2018 when anthropologist Manuel Medrano deciphered a khipu from the 16th century using a code based on prime numbers. The knots weren't just tallies, their positions and colors corresponded to a base 3 numerical system, a method so advanced it wouldn't be formally documented until the 1940s. Even more startling, identical khipus found hundreds of miles apart shared echo knots, subtle variations in tension that seemed to reference each other, like quantum particles sharing states. Indigenous elders have a simpler explanation. The cords remember their twins. The real mystery lies in the void knots, a feature unique to ceremonial khipus. These are sections where the cord appears to knot itself without human intervention, the fibers twisted into geometries that defy conventional weaving. When physicists at MIT subjected these segments to X-ray diffraction, they detected microscopic cavities within the fibers, tiny, perfect spheres of empty space arranged in fractal patterns. Dr. Alicia Rosen, a materials scientist, compares them to Bose-Einstein condensates frozen in thread, structures that theoretically could vibrate at frequencies capable of storing quantum information. Perhaps the most haunting evidence of lost knowledge comes from a khipu fragment recovered near Nazca in 2020. Its knots, when mapped onto a 3D model, formed a perfect trefoil knot, a shape that, in modern topology, represents a wormhole's entrance. The chances of this occurring randomly are astronomically low, yet the Inca couldn't have known advanced topology unless their understanding of the cosmos included concepts we're still struggling to articulate. Today, teams are using AI to decode khipus at scale, feeding thousands of images into neural networks. Early results suggest the cords might not just record data. They could be equations weaving together astronomy, sacred geography, and something else entirely. One algorithm flagged a recurring pattern in ceremonial khipus, sequences that, when graphed, resemble the probability waves of quantum mechanics, the implication. The Inca may have been encoding observations about reality's fabric itself, using thread as their medium. As the codes slowly yield their secrets, one thing becomes clear: these weren't mere tools. They were maps not of lands or stars, but of the invisible forces stitching the universe together. And somewhere in those tangled threads, a conversation across centuries is waiting to be heard. The shadow dance began where light could not follow, deep in temple courtyards at the darkest hour of night, when even the stars seemed to hold their breath. Participants wore tunics stitched with hundreds of hand-polished obsidian mirrors, each no larger than a thumbnail, arranged in spirals that pulsed like the eyes of a spider. Spanish friar Bernabé Cobo, who witnessed a clandestine performance in 1594, described the dancers as living constellations, their bodies swallowing torchlight only to spit it back fractured. The mirrors weren't just adornments, they were traps. Inca priests believed reflections could snare beings from adjacent realities, entities that moved in the gaps between blinks, their true forms invisible until caught in angled glass. The ritual's true horror unfolded in its choreography. Dancers moved in precise, jagged patterns, their motions designed to create fleeting moments where multiple mirrors aligned. Colonial records mention a specific sequence called the scissors step, where performers crossed legs abruptly, causing their mirror arrays to flash in synchrony. Survivors claimed these instants opened windows, brief tears in the veil through which spectators sometimes glimpsed figures moving in perfect counterpoint to the dancers, their limbs too long, their smiles too wide. One account from the Spanish Inquisition's suppressed files describes a performer suddenly freezing mid-step, her mirrors reflecting not the courtyard, but a cavernous space where something many-legged scuttled toward the glass. She vanished before dawn, leaving only a pile of scorched mirrors and the scent of burnt copper. Why risk such encounters? The answer lies in fragments of a hymn recovered from a collapsed tunnel near Ollantaytambo. It speaks of the hungry ones, beings who could teach secrets of architecture that defied gravity or agriculture that made crops grow in barren soil, but only if lured across and bound to service. The mirrors acted as both bait and cage, their reflections forming a labyrinth the entities couldn't escape. At least that was the theory. Trial transcripts from Lima's witchcraft trials detail 16 cases between 1589 and 1600 where entire troops disappeared during performances, their last screams reportedly coming from the mirrors themselves. One condemning bishop wrote of finding a dancer's abandoned tunic with the mirrors intact, each now reflecting a different moonlit landscape, none matching the Andes. Modern experiments shed eerie light on these accounts. In 2017, physicists at the University of Cusco recreated the mirror arrays using period-accurate obsidian. High-speed cameras revealed something unsettling. When spun at the documented scissors step velocity, the mirrors produced flashes of polarized light at frequencies known to induce temporary visual hallucinations. But there was an anomaly. Some test subjects, all descendants of Andean shamans, reported seeing the same counter-dancers described in colonial records, down to the unnerving smile. MRI scans showed their visual cortices activating as if observing real movement, despite no external stimulus being present. Perhaps the most damning evidence comes from the mirrors themselves. Recent excavations at a Spanish colonial prison uncovered a cache of confiscated ritual objects, including one surviving dancer's tunic. Microscopic analysis revealed scratches on the obsidian too fine for human tools, parallel grooves spaced exactly 8 micrometers apart, matching no known mineral formation. Stranger still, the scratches glowed faintly under ultraviolet light, a phenomenon seen only in quartz subjected to intense electromagnetic stress. What the Inca understood, and what we're only beginning to glimpse, is that reflection isn't just about light. It's about boundaries. Every mirror holds the potential to be a door, and every door swings both ways. The dancers didn't just wear those mirrors to catch entities. They wore them as armor, knowing full well that some reflections don't stop at the surface, they pull. What if those Inca priests weren't just performing rituals? They were pioneering early experiments in multidimensional physics. Modern quantum theory proposes a startling parallel to their shadow dances in the form of the many worlds interpretation. The idea that every decision spawns alternate realities branching like infinite reflections. Those obsidian mirrors may have been more than spiritual tools. They could have been accidental portals, exploiting principles scientists are only now beginning to understand. Take physicist Michio Kaku's work with metamaterials, artificial surfaces engineered to bend light in ways nature never intended. In lab experiments, these perfect mirrors can warp perception so drastically that test subjects report seeing impossible angles, like corridors folding back on themselves. The Inca mirrors, polished to unnatural smoothness with volcanic ash, may have achieved similar effects. When spun during the dance, their synchronized flashes could have created fleeting optical vortices, temporary distortions where space itself appears to wrinkle. Cosmologist Lisa Randall theorizes such phenomena might briefly expose what she calls brain worlds, adjacent dimensions separated by membranes thinner than a photon's wavelength. Even more compelling are recent experiments at CERN Antimatter Lab, where scientists observed subatomic particles behaving differently when reflected between precisely angled surfaces. Some quantum states literally vanished mid-bounce, as if slipping through a crack between realities. This mirrors pun intended ancient accounts of dancers disappearing during the ritual's most intense sequences. The common thread, reflection doesn't just show us the world, it alters it. String theorist Brian Greene suggests polished surfaces might act as dimensional reducers, collapsing the wave function of reality in localized zones, allowing glimpses of what normally stays hidden. But here's where the Inca may have grasped something modern physics still struggles with. Intention matters. Their dances weren't random. Every step was calibrated to celestial events, their chants tuned to specific frequencies. This aligns with groundbreaking work at Stanford's Consciousness Engineering Lab, where meditators focusing intently on mirrored surfaces produced measurable fluctuations in zero-point energy fields. Lead researcher Dr. Amara Singh notes, the observer's state fundamentally changes the observed phenomenon, especially at reflective boundaries. Perhaps those priests didn't just stumble upon these effects, they weaponized them. The mirror's spiral patterns match fractal geometries now used in quantum computing to stabilize entangled states. Their placement on the body major chakra point suggests an understanding of bioresonance centuries ahead of its time. Most chillingly, the scissors step corresponds almost exactly to the movement patterns used in modern dimensional stitching experiments, where rapid mirror oscillations briefly stabilize wormholes. The implications are staggering. If the dancers truly opened windows between worlds, what slipped through wasn't just light or particles, it was information. Those counter-dancers witnesses described might have been echoes of ourselves from neighboring timelines, glimpsed in the instant before the mirrors snapped reality back into place. Or worse, something that noticed the open door and decided to step through. As physicist Sean Carroll cautions, the multiverse isn't just out there, it's right here, separated from us by barriers thinner than we dare imagine. The Inca didn't just perform rituals, they conducted experiments, and their results, etched in colonial terror and ultraviolet glowing scratches, suggest some doors should stay closed. Beneath the icy waves of Lake Titicaca lies a secret the Inca guarded with their lives, a submerged doorway, not carved by human hands but worn smooth by centuries of whispered rituals. At 12,000 feet above sea level, where the air is thin enough to make your heart pound, shamans once prepared for dives that defied logic. They'd coat their tongues with a snuff made from powdered vilca seeds and crushed seashells, a concoction so potent it could stop a novice's lungs within minutes. But for the trained, it did something extraordinary. It slowed their pulse to near hibernation, allowing them to sink into the depths without drowning, their minds wide awake while their bodies hovered on the edge of death. Recent sonar scans reveal why this ritual was so precise. 18 meters down, near the lake's northeastern edge, sprawls a sprawling complex of geometric shapes too perfect for nature: rectangular platforms, staircases leading nowhere, and a circular depression locals call the moon's navel. Marine archaeologists argue these could be remnants of Tiwanaku settlements submerged by ancient seismic shifts, but indigenous elders tell a different story. They speak of Amaru Yuta, the serpent's house, a threshold built by the gods themselves, where water didn't just fill space, it bent time. Divers who have braved the frigid depths report eerie anomalies, compass needles spinning wildly near certain rocks, flashlights dimming without explanation, and fleeting shadows that move against the currents. The most chilling accounts come from shamans who survived the ritual. One early 20th century chronicle describes a man who resurfaced after 30 minutes with his hair bleached white, clutching a spongy black stone that dissolved in sunlight. He claimed to have wandered hallways of liquid stone, where the water flowed upward and voices chanted in a language that burned like salt. Modern divers replicating the snuff formula under medical supervision report similar visions: corridors of light, figures with elongated limbs gesturing toward deeper darkness, and a pervasive sense of being allowed to see, as if something were permitting temporary access. What seals the lake's mystery are the sonar glitches. In 2019, a Bolivian research team mapping the lakebed watched their screens flicker as they passed over the moon's navel. For 12 seconds, the scanners displayed a towering, angular structure, a perfect archway standing where nothing had appeared moments before. When they circled back, it was gone. Geologists insist it was a software error caused by methane pockets, but the Aymara divers hired for the expedition refused to return, muttering about the door that only opens for the drowned. Perhaps the truth lies in the lake's unique properties. NASA studies confirm its water contains rare mineral combinations that could, under specific conditions, generate piezoelectric charges, tiny electrical currents that might stimulate brain regions linked to hallucinations. Yet that doesn't explain why every shaman who dove there described the same archway, the same corridors, nor does it account for the artifacts occasionally washed ashore, gold plaques etched with constellations unknown to modern astronomy, or ceramic shards depicting humanoid figures with webbed hands holding what looks like a key. Today, the rituals are banned, the snuff recipes burned by colonial priests, but on still nights when the moon reflects perfectly on Lake Titicaca's surface, fishermen whisper of shadows moving beneath the waves, not swimming but walking. And sometimes, just sometimes, the water ripples in patterns too precise to be random, as if something below is testing the lock. The waters of Lake Titicaca don't just hide ruins, they guard whispers of something far older, far stranger. Indigenous legends speak of star beings who emerged from its depths in antediluvian times, giants wrapped in robes of shimmering scales who taught the first humans agriculture, astronomy, and something they called the language of stones. These weren't just myths to the Inca, they were historical accounts etched into the walls of their most sacred temples and the so-called submerged doorway near the moon's navel. Locals have another name for it, Amaru Kuna, the serpent's gateway, a portal said to open only for those who know how to ask in the old tongue. What chills modern researchers isn't just the consistency of these stories, but their eerie parallels to Stargate legends worldwide. The Babylonian Apsu, a watery abyss where the god E summoned knowledge from beyond. The Hindu Samudra Manthan, where gods and demons churned the ocean to reveal celestial artifacts. Even Plato's account of Atlantis describes portals of orichalcum and crystal beneath the waves, but the most striking similarity lies in the details. Like the Inca, these cultures all depict their star visitors as amphibious entities equally at home in water and air, who vanished as suddenly as they appeared, often promising to return. Physical evidence deepens the mystery. In 2016, divers exploring the lake's underwater ruins recovered a fist-sized obsidian sphere etched with spiral glyphs matching descriptions from Inca creation myths. When subjected to spectral analysis, the stone emitted trace radiation patterns identical to meteoritic alloys, yet its surface showed tool marks suggesting deliberate carving. Even stranger, the glyphs, when mapped three-dimensionally, formed a perfect Fibonacci sequence, a mathematical pattern found in everything from galaxies to seashells. Indigenous elders weren't surprised. The star teachers spoke in spirals. One shaman told anthropologists their words were knots in time. Mainstream archaeology scoffs, attributing such finds to pre-Columbian metallurgy or wishful thinking. But consider this, the lake sits directly beneath the solar gate of Tiwanaku, an ancient monolith covered in carvings of humanoid figures with elongated skulls and tear-shaped eyes floating above stylized waves. The same motifs appear in Mesopotamian cylinder seals and Egyptian temple reliefs, cultures separated by oceans and millennia. Could these all be fragmentary memories of the same visitors? The Aymara people who still guard the lake's secrets tell of a prophecy. When the doorway next opens, the star beings will bring not knowledge but judgment. They'll walk the earth again, they say, and this time the water won't hide them. On moonless nights, fishermen still report seeing faint bioluminescent pulses deep below their boats, forming geometric shapes that linger for minutes before dissolving. Scientists blame algae blooms. The old ones whisper otherwise. They say the gateway isn't sleeping, it's waiting, and the key isn't made of stone or metal. It's written in the stars themselves, in constellations that haven't aligned since before the first pyramids rose. When they do, the water will part, and whatever's been watching from the other side will finally step through. The coca leaf oracle didn't just glimpse the future. It tore open the seams between possible worlds, revealing realities where empires never fell and destinies branched like rivers. Imagine a priest kneeling before a polished obsidian slab. his mouth numbed by the bitter tang of sacred coca leaves, chewing in rhythms that matched the pulse of the earth itself. Each movement was deliberate: left side for visions of war, right for peace, center for the forbidden knowledge whispered between timelines. Colonial scribes dismissed these rituals as primitive narcotic trances, but the Inca knew something far more profound was unfolding. When prepared correctly, blessed under specific lunar phases, mixed with powdered seashells rich in calcium, those humble leaves became lenses focusing the mind's eye across dimensions. Witnesses described priests entering a state called the humming silence, where their bodies locked rigid while their pupils dilated until the irises vanished. In this trance, they reported walking through mirrored corridors where every reflection showed a different version of reality. One where the Spanish ships never reached shore, another where the mountains themselves spoke in thunderous poetry. The most detailed account comes from a captured shaman's confession to the Spanish Inquisition, where he described seeing 1,000 Cuzcos, some gleaming with gold, others swallowed by jungle, all existing simultaneously like pages in a cosmic book. What terrified the invaders wasn't the visions themselves, but the accuracy. Several prophecies from smallpox outbreaks to the exact date of an eclipse later proved chillingly precise. Modern science sheds eerie light on these practices. Coca leaves contain alkaloids that, when combined with alkaline substances like crushed seashells, transform into cocaine, but not as we know it. The Inca preparation created a time-release effect, allowing gradual absorption that stimulated the prefrontal cortex without overdose. Brain scans of contemporary Andean chewers show heightened activity in the claustrum, a brain region some neuroscientists believe integrates consciousness across parallel perceptions. In essence, the priests weren't hallucinating, they were tuning their neural receivers to frequencies beyond ordinary reality. The Spanish tried desperately to stamp out the practice, burning fields of coca and branding users as heretics. Yet they couldn't deny its power. Even as churches rose over temple ruins, conquistadors secretly consulted captured shamans, desperate for glimpses of rebel movements or lost gold. One bishop's hidden journal from 1583 recounts interrogating a priest who predicted his own execution date to the hour, along with the exact spot where the bishop would later die in a landslide. The final entry simply reads, "God save us from men who see too much." Today, fragments of the oracle survive in remote villages where elders still interpret leaf patterns in ceremonial gourds. Some anthropologists report encounters with aged shamans whose predictions defy coincidence. One accurately drew a researcher's childhood home in Sweden, right down to the blue door she'd forgotten. But the full sequences, those were lost when the last high priests took them to their graves, their final visions perhaps showing futures where the knowledge lived on untouched by flames. Perhaps some doors closed for good, or perhaps, like the leaves themselves, the truth just went dormant, waiting for the right moment to bloom again. The jungle doesn't just hide ruins, it swallows time itself. In the mist-shrouded foothills of the Andes, where coca leaves still flutter in ceremonial gourds like green tongues whispering secrets, travelers occasionally stumble into something far stranger than hallucinations. They slip, not physically but temporally, finding themselves unmoored from the present, adrift in moments that shouldn't exist. Take the case of Elias Mercer, an Australian botanist who joined a Quechua coca ceremony near Monu National Park in 2019. After chewing the sacred leaves in sequence with the shaman's chants, he swears he wandered into a clearing where the trees bore fruits extinct for centuries and worse, where a figure in Inca armor watched him silently from the tree line before vanishing like smoke. When Mercer staggered back to camp, his GPS showed he'd been gone 17 minutes. His watch, however, insisted only 90 seconds had passed. These accounts aren't isolated. A French backpacker in 2015 documented eerily similar details after a coca ritual near Pisac. Her journal describes stepping off a trail to suddenly find the terraced hillside swarming with workers in tunics, their tools clinking against stones in a rhythm that matched her pounding heartbeat. The vision dissipated when a modern-day farmer tapped her shoulder, but not before she noticed the workers' shadows stretching in the wrong direction, as if the sun itself had shifted position. Locals nod knowingly at such stories. They speak of Pachacuti, the Quechua concept of time, as a woven fabric that sometimes frays, allowing threads from other eras to briefly cross. Historical records lend unsettling weight to these claims. Spanish chronicler Pedro Cieza de Leon wrote in 1553 of captured shamans who predicted events decades in advance with uncanny accuracy, insisting they'd walk the paths of tomorrow. One particularly chilling entry describes a priest who, after a coca ceremony, accurately recounted a conversation between two conquistadors that would occur 3 days later down to the exact insults exchanged. The Spaniards burned him as a witch, but not before he smiled and whispered, "You'll remember this fire when you feel your own." Modern science offers possible explanations, though none diminish the mystery. Coca's alkaloids, when combined with the alkaline ash traditionally added to ceremonial leaves, create a mild psychedelic effect that can distort time perception. Functional MRI scans show these compounds temporarily dampen activity in the brain's supramarginal gyrus, a region critical for processing temporal sequences. But that doesn't explain the shared details across accounts. The extinct fruits, the misplaced shadows, the overwhelming sense of being observed by figures just outside vision's reach. Perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from an unexpected source: geology. The Sacred Valley's unique mineral deposits include high concentrations of magnetite, a magnetic iron oxide known to interact with human brainwaves. Studies at the University of Cusco found that volunteers wearing magnetite-lined caps reported brief time distortion episodes during coca ceremonies, as if their neural clocks had been reset. Indigenous elders need no laboratories to confirm this. They simply nod to the mountains where weathered stone carvings depict spirals within spirals, a reminder. They say that time isn't a line but a whirlpool. And sometimes, if the leaves and the land and the moment align just right, even a visitor might glimpse what swirls beneath the surface. So the next time you see a traveler in the Andes staring too long at a coca leaf, eyes wide with something beyond wonder, ask not what they're seeing, but when. The answer might unspool like thread from a dropped spindle, tumbling into patterns no loom could ever replicate. And whether it's chemistry or cosmology or something older than both, one truth remains: the past isn't always behind us. Sometimes it's breathing softly just over your shoulder, waiting for you to turn. The condor's flight began not with a leap but with stillness, a sacred hush as the great bird was brought forward, its wings bound with cords of rainbow-colored wool, its eyes reflecting the pre-dawn sky like pools of liquid obsidian. To the Inca, the condor wasn't just a creature, it was the living bridge between worlds, its wings capable of carving paths through the fabric of the heavens. The ritual's power lay in its simplicity. A shaman would whisper prayers into the bird's ear, each word tied to a knot in the cord before releasing it into the first light. But this wasn't symbolic. Those who witnessed the ceremony swore they could sometimes see a second set of wings larger, translucent, wrapped around the condor's body, as if the shaman's soul had hitched a ride. What's startling isn't just the spiritual significance, it's the science hidden in plain sight. Modern ornithologists tracking Andean condor migration have noticed an anomaly. Their flight paths don't follow food sources or weather patterns. Instead, they trace straight lines between ancient sacred sites: Machu Picchu, Tiwanaku, the Nazca Plateau, forming a grid that precisely overlaps with ley lines, those hypothetical channels of Earth energy debated by geologists. Even more bizarre, the condors ascend to altitudes of 6,000 meters during these rituals, heights where oxygen is so thin their massive bodies should barely function. Yet thermal imaging shows their wing temperatures spike inexplicably during these ascents, as if fueled by something beyond biology. the priests knew this wasn't coincidence. They called the paths Espinion, or the breathing roads, believing the condors rode currents of a different kind, energy streams flowing between the Earth's chakras. Colonial records describe shamans collapsing at the moment of release, their hearts slowing to near cessation while the birds flew impossibly fast, covering distances in hours that should have taken days. Some never woke, their bodies found with faint smiles, their hands clutching feathers that glowed faintly under moonlight. Today, the practice survives in fragments. High in the Apurimac Canyon, Quechua elders still tie prayer ribbons to captive condors before releasing them during solstices, but something's changed. The birds no longer follow the old paths exactly. Their trajectories now curve slightly westward, as if pulled by some new magnetism. Satellite data reveals the shift aligns with a creeping anomaly in the Earth's magnetic field, a wobble scientists can't fully explain. Perhaps the condors sense what instruments barely detect, that the breathing roads aren't fixed. They're shifting, carrying whispers to realms we've yet to name. One truth remains unshaken. When those massive wings catch the dawn for a heartbeat, the sky isn't empty. It's a doorway, and what walks through it wears feathers only on the surface. The Inca weren't alone in seeing wings as gateways. Across continents and eras, cultures have woven birds into their most sacred rites, as if these creatures carry some intrinsic knowledge of the thresholds between worlds. Take the Norse ravens Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, who soared daily from Odin's shoulders across the 9 realms, returning with whispers from lands beyond mortal sight. Like the condor's Espinion flights, these weren't mere metaphors. Viking sagas describe seers consuming raven heart broth to gain their far-seeing sight, entering trances where they too could ride the bird's wings into realms where time frayed at the edges. A shaman's journal from 9th century Iceland recounts a ritual eerily similar to the condor ceremonies. A raven bound with rune-carved cords, its release timed to the aurora's flicker, after which the participant's body lay catatonic for 3 days while their spirit allegedly walked alongside the bird through frost-gilded valleys of the dead. Egypt's Ba-bird strikes an even deeper chord. More than just a symbol of the soul, it was depicted as a human-headed falcon capable of flitting between the mortal world and the Duat, their star-studded underworld. But here's where it chills. Egyptian funerary texts describe the Ba's flight as leaving behind a silver thread, a tether allowing it to return to the mummified body. Modern researchers experimenting with biofeedback sensors have noted something haunting. During deep meditation, some subjects' brainwaves pulse in patterns resembling avian flight rhythms, as if the mind instinctively knows how to ride those currents. Could the Ba and the condor share more than symbolism? Indigenous Shipibo healers in the Amazon speak of Ishin, luminous cords linking shamans to their spirit birds during trances, threads they claim are visible only under the influence of sacred plants. Then there's the Aboriginal Australians' Mummies spirits, often depicted as elongated figures with emu-like legs, dancing across cave walls in Arnhem Land. Their rituals involved singing up birds to open pathways to the dreamtime, a dimension where past, present, and future blur. Elders still tell of initiates who, after days of chanting with emu feathers pressed to their throats, would vanish for weeks, returning with knowledge of water sources or impending droughts, information impossible to glean from their physical surroundings. Sound familiar? It mirrors the Andean condor's role as a harbinger of weather shifts, its flight pattern still used by Quechua farmers to predict rains. The parallels grow uncanny when you examine the tools. Siberian shamans wore crow feather cloaks to fly during ceremonies, just as Inca priests donned condor plumes. Celtic druids interpreted owl flights as omens, much like the Maya read the zigzag patterns of hummingbirds as divine messages. Even the Greek oracle at Dodona listened to the rustling of oak leaves, but only when the wind was stirred by the wings of sacred doves. What stitches these traditions together isn't just coincidence, it's a shared intuition that birds exist simultaneously in our world and another. Their migrations trace routes invisible to us, their night flights navigate by stars we've long forgotten to consult. Perhaps that's why so many cultures position them as psychopomps, guides for souls crossing the ultimate threshold. The condor, the raven, the ba, all were seen as creatures who'd made the journey before and knew the way. Science offers tantalizing hints to explain this universality. Birds perceive magnetic fields through cryptochromes in their eyes, allowing them to literally see Earth's energy grid. Some researchers theorize this could let them detect dimensional weak spots, places where, as quantum physics suggests, space-time might fold. Indigenous elders put it more poetically: birds don't break the sky when they fly through it. They find the cracks that were always there. So the next time you see a crow banking against a storm wind or an eagle riding a thermal updraft, consider this: across millennia, humans have agreed these weren't just animals hunting or migrating. They were messengers moving between the layers of existence, their wings brushing against realities we can only glimpse in rituals, dreams, or the sacred moment when a shaman's chant lifts a condor into the dawn, and for one breathless instant the sky isn't above us. It's all around. Not all who walked the forbidden paths returned whole, if they returned at all. Deep in the Quechua oral traditions, there's a word that sends chills through even the most seasoned elders: Chichai. It describes those who came back from the rituals torn, their bodies present, but their awareness fractured, as if parts of their consciousness had been left behind in the realms they'd trespassed. One folktale tells of a shaman who performed the condor's flight ceremony and returned with his left hand perpetually cold to the touch, his fingers moving as if plucking invisible strings. Villagers claimed they could sometimes hear faint chanting from that hand at night, though his lips never moved. The danger wasn't just losing oneself, it was attracting attention. Inca texts whisper of machaque, a term often translated as dimensional parasites. These weren't demons or spirits in the traditional sense, but entities drawn to the energy of ruptured veils. Spanish missionary logs from the 1500s describe abandoned villages where the only occupants were emaciated survivors huddled in silent circles, their mouths sewn shut with human hair. When questioned, they'd point to the temple walls, where shadowy handprints far larger than any humans overlapped in frantic layers, as if something had clawed its way through from the other side. Modern attempts to replicate these rituals have proven just as perilous. In 2014, a group of anthropology students in Cusco brewed a Vilca snuff based on colonial-era descriptions. 3 were hospitalized with identical symptoms: scorch marks on their palms in fractal patterns, and an inability to perceive the color red, a hue sacred to Inca portal rites. Their MRI scans showed unusual activity in the brain's angular gyrus, a region linked to spatial awareness, as if their minds were still struggling to map a landscape that shouldn't exist. Then there are the places where even the earth seems wounded. Near Puno, a crater-like depression called Saka, the Rip, is avoided by locals to this day. No plants grow within its boundaries, and compasses spin wildly before failing altogether. Geologists found nothing unusual, no magnetic anomalies, no toxic soil. Yet those who have camped nearby report waking to find their tents lined with a fine, iridescent powder that glows under black light, its chemical composition shifting unpredictably between analyzers. Elders say it's residue from where the world bled after a priest once tried to force open a gateway without the proper offerings. Perhaps the most chilling evidence comes from linguistic patterns. Comparative studies of shamanic chants across the Andes reveal a curious anomaly. The most dangerous rituals all contain a specific phonetic sequence, a guttural trill followed by a dental click, that doesn't appear in everyday Quechua. When played backward, this sequence produces infrasound frequencies known to induce disorientation and dread in laboratory settings. It's as if the words themselves were designed to destabilize perception, to pry open cracks in consensus reality. The warnings are etched into the land itself, crumbling temples where certain corridors remain scrupulously avoided, not out of superstition, but because stepping into them triggers migraines and nosebleeds. Caves where the echoes return seconds too late or in the wrong order, as if sound itself gets lost along the way. And always the stories of those who ignored the signs, the priestess who aged decades in a night, the village children who swore they played with a shiny brother no adult could see, the explorers who vanished while documenting ruins only to reappear years later, insisting they'd been gone mere hours while their hair had turned white and their pockets were filled with sand that glowed. Faintly in the dark, these aren't ghost stories, they're cautionary tales carved from first-hand accounts, repeated across generations not to entertain but to terrify, to inoculate against the lure of forbidden knowledge. Because the darkest truth hidden in these warnings isn't that the rituals don't work, it's that they do, perfectly, and once you've opened a door, you can never be certain what stepped through behind you. The quest to unravel the Incas' interdimensional secrets hasn't faded into history, it's alive in labs, jungles, and mountaintops where modern seekers walk the razor's edge between science and the sacred. Take Dr. Anika Patel, a neuroanthropologist running the first legally sanctioned Datura trials since the Spanish Inquisition. Working with Quechua elders in a high-security lab near Cusco, her team administers microdoses while monitoring brain activity with magnetoencephalography. The results, when subjects describe encounters with mirrored ones, their neural scans show synchronized gamma waves in the temporoparietal junction, a brain region linked to out-of-body experiences. Yet Patel treads carefully. This isn't about proving or disproving shamanic claims, she insists. It's about mapping the boundaries of human perception. When 6 unrelated subjects all describe the same obsidian tower in the same coordinates of their visual field, we have to ask what's generating that shared imagery. Meanwhile, at the Gate of Amaru Muru, physicist Javier Morales leads a different kind of experiment. Using LiDAR scanners normally reserved for quantum research, his team has detected rhythmic pulses of terahertz radiation emanating from the stone frequencies known to interact with human DNA. During the solstices, when Inca priests once performed their rituals, the emissions spiked dramatically, producing brief but measurable distortions in the local gravitational field. It's like the stone has a heartbeat, Morales notes, showing graphs where the pulses align with oral histories of the gate's breath, but his work sparks controversy. Indigenous Aymara leaders protest the scans as a violation, arguing that treating sacred sites as laboratory specimens strips them of their power. You cannot measure a prayer with a machine, warns Elder Marcella Quisp. The gate opens for those who listen, not those who poke. Then there are the rogue experimenters, those who bypass ethics boards entirely. Deep in the Peruvian Amazon, a shadowy collective called Proyecto Ukhu Pacha Project Underworld reportedly recreated the blood moon ceremony in 2022 using smuggled vilca seeds and thermal drone. Leaked footage shows participants convulsing as their body temperatures plummet to near hypothermic levels, while the drones capture thermal anomalies described as human-shaped cold spots moving independently through the ritual space. Authorities dismissed it as hoax footage, but the group's manifesto, laced with phrases lifted from colonial-era shamanic texts, hints at darker ambitions, to walk where the Inca priests fell and retrieve what they left behind. The line between research and recklessness blurs further with figures like entrepreneur Daniel Rourke, who patented a neuro-ritual headset claiming to replicate Datura trances using transcranial magnetic stimulation. Marketed to Silicon Valley biohackers as Shaman OS, the device was pulled after testers reported recurring nightmares of faceless scribes rewriting their memories. Rourke now faces lawsuits from indigenous groups accusing him of commodifying sacred knowledge. This isn't innovation, says Quechua lawyer in Mayu. It's spiritual strip mining, yet some collaborations offer hope. In the Sacred Valley, a unique partnership between Amite engineers and Cuero shamans is studying the psychoacoustic properties of ritual chants. Early findings suggest certain vocal harmonics can induce brainwave states identical to deep meditation without drugs. The frequencies in these chants match the resonant properties of quartz, explains acoustic researcher Dr. Elena Zhu. It's possible the Inca were using sound to tune the brain like a radio, aligning it with frequencies beyond normal perception. The shamans nod knowingly. They've long insisted their chants aren't metaphors, they're tools. The ancestors built bridges with song, says Cuero priestess Vilma Sumac. Now your machines are finally hearing the music. As lasers scan stones and brain probes trace ancient pathways, one question lingers. Can science ever truly capture what the Inca understood? Or are some doors only visible to those willing to step through, not as observers, but as participants in a conversation older than history? The condor still flies at dawn, the gate still hums beneath the stars, and somewhere between data and devotion, the rituals whisper their oldest lesson. To see beyond the world, you must first admit how little of it you truly know. The line between myth and reality isn't just blurred, it's woven from threads we're still learning to see. For centuries, the rituals of the Inca were dismissed as superstition, colorful stories spun by a civilization conquered and silenced. But what if we've been reading their legacy all wrong? The condor's flight, the humming mirrors, the blood moon ceremonies, these weren't just fantasies. They were experiments, meticulously crafted attempts to navigate realms beyond the tangible, to converse with forces that modern physics is only beginning to name. The Inca didn't just imagine parallel worlds, they built bridges to them, leaving behind not just ruins but roadmaps. Consider what we've uncovered. Sonar glitches in Lake Titicaca that reveal structures vanishing as quickly as they appear. Khipu chords whose knots defy mathematical coincidence. Datura trances that sync unrelated minds to the same visions. These aren't anomalies, they're echoes of a science we're only now reconstructing. A science that treated consciousness as a tool and the cosmos as a living, breathing network of doors. Yet for all our fascination, we must tread carefully. These rituals weren't parlor tricks. They were sacred, dangerous, and often lethal. The warnings etched into colonial records and whispered in Quechua villages aren't just folklore. They're the scars of those who learned too late that some thresholds demand payment in blood, sanity, or worse. Respect isn't just about reverence, it's about recognizing that the Incas' knowledge wasn't ours to take, but to approach with humility. Modern labs can replicate the Vilca bruise and measure the terahertz pulses at Amaru Muru, but without the context of centuries-old chants, the guidance of elders, the lunar alignments woven into every step, we risk becoming like those Spanish conquistadors who plundered gold but burned the manuscripts. The true legacy of these rituals isn't in proving whether they worked, but in understanding why they mattered. They were a dialogue with the universe, a plea for balance in a world where the seen and unseen were inseparable. So here's the question that lingers like mist over Machu Picchu at dawn. If parallel worlds exist, if the condors really carried souls to Hanan Pacha, if the golden discs truly summoned beings from beyond the stars, what might the Inca have left behind in those realms? Artifacts, knowledge, or perhaps, as the elders fear, warnings we've yet to decipher. The stones whisper, the mirrors wait, and somewhere beyond the veil, the drums might still be beating. What do you think they're trying to tell us? Drop your thoughts below. Let's keep the conversation alive.